Now, are you finding problems paying your mortgage? Because fears that 75,000 homes in the UK could be repossessed this year has prompted the government to launch new initiatives to try to enable people to stay in their properties. But for Terry Armstrong and many more like him, these changes will be too little, too late.
This is not just a house, it's a way of life. All our memories and everything is wrapped up in the home. And when you lose your home, you lose your identity. You belong nowhere.
Well, Terry and his family were forced from the home they'd lived in for more than 30 years after it was repossessed in August last year.
However, after months of sleeping on friends' sofas and floors, the family have taken drastic action and moved back into their old home as squatters. And Terry joins us now, along with Adam Sampson, the Chief Executive of Shelter, and our financial expert Andrew Oxlade, who will explain how this morning's bank bailout will affect any homeowner. Welcome, everybody. Terry, let's start with you. You're a working man, you've worked all your life, you've been a successful businessman. I think the house was worth a great deal of money just a few years ago. How much was it worth?
£650,000.
£650,000. And it's now worth what, do we think?
£450,000.
OK, because of obviously all the property prices have dropped. And you have worked your socks off, you've paid off the mortgage twice, remortgaged it to fund business ventures, and you've got a good business brain.
Yeah.
But
well,
when
thank you, Fern. That's really
well, it must have been all right for 30 years, but then something went wrong and you started to make some bad business decisions.
Yeah.
And then what happened?
Well, to correct you, I didn't make a bad business decision. No one plans to get evicted. Nobody meets somebody, falls in love, gets married, raises a family and says, I tell you what we'll do, let's get evicted. So something happens that you did not plan for. In our case, that's exactly what happened.
So how suddenly, did you get into trouble?
we got into debt, and perhaps this is not the programme to go there really, Fun, but we got into debt. So eventually, of course, we couldn't pay our mortgage. So eventually, very complicated story, but it's all on the internet if you want to see it.
How quickly did it happen? Because there are a lot of people whose businesses are in trouble, who make decisions which turn out to be the wrong ones.
10 days to raise £30,000. That's my arrears with my mortgage company.
Yeah.
10 days. It's difficult to find that sort of money, especially when things have happened in the past, you know, that you've crashed. I'm very lucky. I've got a brilliant family, fantastic wife, 2 lovely boys, and we stick together.
Well, when it began to go wrong, and you knew that the bailiffs were on the way, rather than have them banging on the door and chucking you out, you actually went to the bailiff with the key.
I couldn't put my wife through it. After 30 years in the same cottage, I just couldn't put her through it. So I went to the court. I found the name of the bailiff, found his mobile phone, rang him and said, I'll tell you what, mate, I'll give you the key, don't come crashing down the driveway, you know.
And you walk out, when you walked out of that house, because you'd had a 40th anniversary party and your friends had thrown a huge party for you.
But they never knew that we were being evicted the following week.
So you'd kept a completely...
It was a surprise party, you know, so in our garden. So we couldn't spoil all that for people. Some friends from Spain came, stuff like that.
So you knew that was the end? You knew that as they were in there
we were
having
offering
a party.
all sorts, trying to do a deal, but it's a stone wall. You can't get through it. And once there's a court order, it's just like a machine. It just moves on. And so we even nearly had it sold once, but the fella in the end didn't buy it. But nonetheless, we knew we were going to be evicted on the 13th. So on the 12th, we went and hired a van. I tell you what, the stuff you save over 30 years, I never realised how much junk we had in our house. And I won't throw anything away. But anyway...
but they're all memories, of course. I mean, you say that your children growing up...
Philip, there's 2 trees in our garden, one from my mum and one from Kim's mum. They're dead now, our mums, but those 2 trees are what presents that they bought us as saplings, and they're now trees, 30 years. So that's what you leave. You don't just leave, oh, I'll just shut the door and walk away. You don't. you leave a way of life. It's a lovely little village, our village.
And it's a home, not just a house, it's
That's
a
it.
home.
Memories everywhere, you know.
So on the 12th, the van arrives and you put all your belongings over 30 years in there, and then where do you go?
Well, we spread the stuff about, to be honest, because apparently at one time the council could pay for storage, and we did have a lot. Our stuff is still spread about. So people take some in their garage, in their spare rooms, and then you start to look for somewhere to sleep, you know, and so you camp out at people's places. But, you know, they get fed up with you in the end. They don't want to see your sad, sorry face every day. So gradually, the house was empty for months. They couldn't sell the house. But of course, they can't sell the house because the banks are not granting any mortgages. So my house is stood there empty. Christmas is coming. And I've got nowhere to put my family.
And how's your state of mind at this stage? Because you'd contemplated suicide.
I did, yeah. Where we are in Kent, there's a high-speed rail link, and yeah, I sat on the parapet. I sat on the thing, the parapet, and I was actually thinking about it strong. But you know what? No train came along, and in the end, I thought,
if a train had come along,
I may have. I'll tell you what it is. You feel like an absolute failure. You feel like you've really let your family down for things that I've done, you know, and I didn't know how to face it. I didn't know. I was ashamed. And now we're talking through our website to other guys. On Christmas Eve, I spent nearly 2 hours talking to a fellow in Birmingham, talking him out of committing suicide because he was losing his house second week of January. The house is gone now. That's what it's like. I'm sorry if I'm boring you. I'll just back off.
Not at all.
But the fact of life is, yes, you do contemplate it. But what would that do for Kim and the kids? They're even in more trouble. Then the Prime Minister said, in extraordinary times, calls for extraordinary action. I'm quoting him. So I took action and moved back in my house.
So you found, because you'd handed the keys over to the bailiff, but you remembered there was another hidden key.
Well, that was really weird. Our kids come home at all sorts of hours at night. I have 2 boys, you know, and they live, and they was always forgetting their keys, so they would throw stones at the windows and wake us up. So we decided to put a spare key to the French windows under a rock in the garden, which is now called Northern Rock, under the key in the garden. And when all this happened, I went round to the house. It looks very sad. To see your house sad.
Yeah.
The house was saying, "Oh, come on, Armstrong, come back," you know. Looked under the rock. It was a little cellophane bag. We kept the key in, you know, because so it wouldn't go rusty. And there was the key. So I went round to the French windows, and let myself in.
So
I didn't break it.
Yes, because it would have been illegal if you'd broken in.
According to our friends from Shelter, that's illegal.
So the squatters' rights you looked up, and nobody has come and thrown you out yet?
No, but
Nothing's
I can expect
happened?
it, apparently. I can expect an injunction to be served on me to get out.
But in the meantime, are you costing anybody any money? Are you
No.
costing the state money because
No,
you're there?
I've offered mortgage payments.
Yes.
We pay for everything. All our services are paid for.
Gas, water,
gas,
electricity?
water, everything. We pay for everything. We did that day one because if you don't, it's illegal to steal gas, water.
So it's better than the B&B that the state would offer you, or any council accommodation?
But the council couldn't give us anything, Fern. The council don't have any money. They were brilliant at our council. They really tried to help us. You can't rent a place because you've got an eviction on your credit rating. Well, of course, the letting agents and landlords go, "Oh, no, God, no, I can't have that," you know.
Well, you say that financially, I mean, you sort of cease to exist, really. You sort of drop off the map.
You do. Did you know it, that your car insurance is cancelled because you have no fixed abode? We came off the electoral roll. There's consequences to being evicted from your home.
So suddenly you're in a subculture.
That's absolutely right. I mean, one of the real tragedies with repossessions isn't just the sort of stuff that Terry's been talking about losing your home and all the financial issues around that, but it's suddenly you move into this twilight world, and the problem is not just that there's insufficient help for people who want to hang on to their homes. When people have lost their homes, then there's insufficient help as well. And it's hardly a surprise if people do take the sort of action that Terry's taken.
What does Shelter recommend people to do if they're facing eviction?
Well, the first thing to do is to try and fight it off, and there are ways of doing that. Terry did.
Yeah.
It's not going to work for everybody. The second thing is to contact the local authority and advice agencies, and usually you can sort something out. There are cases, though, and Terry's is unfortunately one of them, where it becomes so difficult that that there is no formal help for them, and under those circumstances you can't blame people if they take the sort of action.
I'm 68.
Absolutely.
And squatting.
Absolutely. I mean, it is horrific, and it is an indictment on our society that a home that's repossessed stands empty, and a family that is in need of a home is forced to sleep on friends' floors.
And we imagine that Shelter looks after the homeless who are sleeping rough on the streets, people who, for whatever reason, are on their own on the streets. But suddenly you're finding you're being contacted by company directors and people with high-powered jobs.
Yeah, I mean, Shelter's always dealt with more than just people sleeping on the streets, but in the last 6, 9, 12 months, the number of people who've come to us has just gone completely through the roof, and the sorts of people have very much changed. There are, you know, this can happen to any of us out there. If we lose our jobs you know, we get unlucky, or something happens in our domestic lives or in our business lives, it can happen to any of us. That's the real lesson here.
Andrew, we saw this morning the government's to bail out banks for a second time now, boosting lending to fend off a prolonged recession triggered by the worst economic turmoil in 70 years. Well, what about all the other stuff that happened? What about the first bailout? What about interest rate cuts? What about the VAT reduction? I mean, are these, you know, sort of let's just chuck money at it, or is there actually a plan here?
Well, this is slightly different from the last plan, but I think the analogy that you guys gave me last time, and when we sat on the sofa in October, I think Fern said, surely this is just a gamble. This is just like having a flush on the horses. And yes, there's an element of that, and it hasn't worked in full. It looked like it had worked a little bit. It stopped the banks from collapsing, so it worked in that sense. But part of the plan was to try to get banks to lend more, to stabilise the property market, to try and avoid situations like the one we're talking about here.
So what
that hasn't fully happened. So now they're doing it again. But it's all slightly different to what they did last time. Before they took kind of watered down stakes in the bank, now they're taking a much bigger stake in RBS, which is NatWest on the high street. So they're actually effectively going to own 70% of that bank. But there's also other strands of this. I mean, basically, it's more money lent to invested in the banks, for one, which is what they did last time. But they're also creating an opportunity to throw away bad debts. Now, if they can throw away their bad debts and fess up, basically, and say, yes, I've got all these bad debts.
Where do you throw them to?
Well, this is what they're going to create, a kind of opportunity, an insurance scheme, effectively, to suck all that bad debt into.
Where does this money?
It's complicated, but I mean,
whose money is it? I mean, appreciate that it's complicated, but where does this money come from? Billions and billions and tens of billions.
10 times more than it was in.
We're up to about $1 trillion, I think, all in all, of stuff they've announced, basically.
And where's it come from? Where is this money kept?
It's borrowed, effectively.
From who?
It's borrowed from international markets. They'll borrow it in bond markets and things like that. They basically issue bits of paper and say to investors around the world, can you lend the British government some money, because we need it at the moment. So that's where they get the money in now. Eventually, you have to pay for that with higher taxes further down the road. You know,
so
no two
we're
ways
all
about
robbing Peter to pay Paul, and in the meantime, it's we, all of us here, who pay tax. We are the ones who are giving
that's
them the money.
argument is between those two. Is basically, do you do something? All the political parties are aligned in saying, yes, we need to do something. So they're all frantically running around and launching schemes and so forth. And then the other side of the argument is maybe you do nothing, because this thing's going to happen anyway, and at least we don't burden ourselves in the future with the tax liability from it.
I think the trouble with this is that what we're doing is not that it's wrong, but we're bailing out the lenders. And what's happening to the borrowers?
Yeah.
You know, and we're normal people like Terry, people like all of us who've got mortgages. There's many tens, hundreds of thousands of people out there who've borrowed in good faith. And where is the bailout for us? Yes, government has done a certain amount to stave off repossessions, but much more needs to be done. And in particular, we need places for people who end up homeless to go to. And we need big government investment, as they've done in the banks, in actually offers for people like that.
A final word, Andrew, because we are running out of time. Is that it now, or is there more to come?
Who knows? I'll probably be back. Nobody knows the answer to what the solution is, but it's just another attempt. Probably there's going to need to be more. Basically, we've had stage 1, this is stage 2. The final stage is to nationalise all the banks. Now, that really would be a doomsday scenario, but it's possible.
Is if the banks are sitting on all the money, and they're prepared to let that lady, because I've seen the news myself this morning, and they've got this money that they can't use, it's got to sit there. Does it not make sense to let people to sit on the mortgages too, and let people stay in, let families stay in their homes until we pass this, instead of throwing us out on the street to social services?
Well, they are leaning on the banks to try and do that, but probably not enough. Maybe they'll be leaning a bit more.
We have to, unfortunately, we have to leave it there, gentlemen. Thank you very much indeed, and the best of luck.
Yes, and your full story is on Tonight with Trevor McDonald tonight, isn't it?
Tonight with Trevor McDonald at 8 o'clock.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For details on repossession and for helplines, have a look at our website. It's itv.com/thismorning.
See you after this.